In this video, we're going to be looking at the sources on two demagogues, Nicas and Alcibiades. So in your source books, you're going to need to find Plutarch, Nicas 33.1 to 2, and then the sections of Plutarch, Alcibiades. So remember, when we're looking at the sources on demagogues, we're looking for the level of power that they had, whether or not the people supported them or that they were angry with them. There will also be an overlap with Nicas and Alcibiades with other units, such as the Athenian control of the empire, and also to do with participation and sort of how people gained power within the democracy. So we'll start with the Plutarch-Nicas source, and you can see here it's a very short source. There's quite a lot to highlight in here. So there's a really handy little quote about Plutarch at the beginning, about Pericles, at the beginning. So now Pericles led the city by virtue of his native excellence and powerful eloquence, i.e. he was a really good speaker, really powerful as a result of it. I had no need to assume any persuasive mannerisms with the multitude. Fine. But then it goes on to Nicas. But Nicas, since he lacked such powers, had excessive wealth, sought by means of this to win the leadership of the people. So this does show that the wealthy people within the Athenian democracy could have a lot of power because they could use that money in order to gain favour with the people. So it shows that demagogues could also use wealth, not just speech. But it links into participation as well, because one of the things we need to look at is whether or not the wealthy had more power or the poor had more power. And this is showing that obviously because Nicas had lots of wealth, he was more powerful as a result of it. He had a rivalry with Cleon. This is what this little next section is going to talk about. Since he despaired of his ability to devise successfully the versatile buffoonery by which Cleon catered to the pleasures of the Athenians. So we could link that quote back to the earlier work that was done on Cleon and how he was using speech to persuade the people of Athens. Go back to Nicas. He tried to captivate the people by choral and gymnastic exhibition. So again, this is just reinforcing the fact that Nicas was using his wealth in order to gain favour with the Athenian people. So he was doing it by putting on, well, shows. So gladiatorial, gymnastic, shows, and obviously music and so on and so forth, because everybody likes a bit of music. Like all prodigality, outdoing the costliness and elegance of all his predecessors and contemporaries. So he put on the best shows compared to everybody else. So we don't have a huge amount of sources on Nicas. Fortunately, the one we do have from Plutarch gets to the point and gives us some really useful evidence about how he was able to gain power within the democracy. So we're going to move on to a much longer section out of Plutarch. This time it's focusing on Alcibiades. This is going to overlap with some topics that we have done within the the Peloponnesian War stuff. When these sort of things come across in the source, I will obviously point them out to you. So we're going to start at the top. So his first entrance into public life, they say, was connected with the contribution of money to the state. So again, that's reinforcing that those who were really, really wealthy could have a huge amount of power within the Athenian democracy. So that's a useful quote for that kind of that topic. And was not design. He was passing by when Athenians were applauding their assembly, asked for the reason of the applause. On being told that contribution money to the state was going on, he went forward to the beamer and made a contribution himself. So you can highlight that if you want to. I haven't bothered. And then there's a really weird story about him having a quail. The crowd clapped their hands and shouted for joy so much that Alcibiades forgot about the quail he was carrying on his back and it flew away. There you go. Fun story there. And everybody was really upset about this and went to find the bird. So that's essentially the rest of that paragraph. Don't really care about birds, to be completely honest. Unless you like quails, then obviously I'm sure you will highlight that quote because you like them. So, though great doors in public service were opened to him by his birth, his wealth, and his personal bravery in battle. So again, we've got different methods which allowed demagogues to become very powerful. So obviously birth, he was aristocratic, so that allows him to gain a lot of power. He uses his wealth, but also we have another kind of possibility that he was just a really good warrior or fighter, general, so on and so forth, and that gained him a really good reputation. So he's got lots of different avenues which he could use in order to keep power. And though he had many friends and followers, he thought that nothing should give him more influence with the people than the charm of his discourse. So he thought that he should be using his speech. And as Plutarch then says in the next sentence, he was a powerful speaker. So not only has he got his aristocratic birth, he's got money, he's got great reputation for fighting, he's also uses rhetoric and is very good at it, like traditional demagogues were. Not only do the comic poets testify, but the most powerful orators himself, he says, in his speech against Medeius, I think I said that wrong, sorry, Alcibiades was a most able speaker in addition to his other gifts. So Alcibiades literally has it all going on for him. No wonder he was so powerful within the democracy. Then it goes on about him being really clever here. So if you want to read it through properly, I'm not going to bother because there's nothing particularly useful. But then we're going to move on to more about him as a person, which is this section here. But all the statecraft and eloquence and lofty purpose and cleverness was attended with great luxuriousness, that's really hard to say, of life, with wanton drunkenness and lewdness and infirmity in dress. So yes, he has the eloquence and he has this kind of aristocratic air about him and he's really clever, but unfortunately or unfortunately, he also has this great luxury in his life. So he dresses a little bit different from everybody else. So he has these long purple robes. He likes to sleep in a really soft bed. You know, how dare he? He has a shield made for himself. So because of these actions here, which was kind of like maybe reinforcing his wealth in front of people, we have this idea that people didn't like him as a result. So the reputable men of the city looked on all these things with loathing and indignation. So his behaviour was causing dislike. So remember I said for demagogues we're always looking for evidence to show that they weren't as supported as necessarily as they could have been, and that they had either enemies or people disliked them. So there's a really helpful quote for that. Then we have a little bit of Aristophanes that we're going to skip over because it doesn't really mean very much to us. And indeed, his voluntary contributions of money, his support of public exhibitions, his unsuppressed munificence, which is like generosity, towards the city, the glory of his ancestry, the power of his eloquence, the comeliness, blah, 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 blah. So basically, again, it's listing through these different reasons why Alcibiades is so popular, why he's so powerful in Athens. So he gives lots of money, so there's the importance of wealth by putting on these kind of great shows, the fact that he's an aristocrat again, the fact that he can give good speeches. He is ticking all of the boxes, again, showing power of a demagogue, including his prowess in war. So it's the same point that Plutarch made earlier. And it works so well that it made the Athenians lenient and tolerant towards everything else. So no matter what he was doing, in fact, I'm going to highlight that while we're here. There we go. It doesn't matter how badly he was behaving, they forgave him because of these different attributes of him being a demagogue. So then Plutarch gives us an example of this about a painter, which, to be honest, it doesn't really tell us very much. But this execution of all the grown men at Melos was chiefly due to him. So remember, Melos was the island during the Peloponnesian War that refused to take either side. Athens sort of told them they got to choose a side. If they don't, they'll kill them all. Melos refused, they killed everybody. So we do have a really useful quote here for the Athens' ruling empire, which is our next topic anyway. So that is a handy quote for that. And it also links to the Peloponnesian, which you can use it in that section, in section 8, if you want to. And then, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to skip this bit because basically he does some bad things about a painting and people are a bit upset about it. And then we move on. So I'm just going to skip that because it's not very particularly interesting. And then we have other issues again. So this is to do with the events before the expedition to Sicily. So remember in section A, we talked about the Sicilian expedition. Alcibiades, and it says, accused of mutilating sacred objects when he was drunk. So that sort of was destroying some statues. So this section of Plutarch is talking about that. We're not interested in all these people, but what we are interested in this quote here, where the people were exasperated and felt bitterly towards Alcibiades. So again, we have this idea that demagogues themselves weren't always really popular with the people, and that their behaviour could force people to act against them. So it's useful for showing that demagogues did not have complete control over the Athenian democracy. So again, this is going on about he's going to go and sail off to Sicily, which is this bit here, and then it says the Athenian people, they were sort of worried about what to do with this case, and they feared lest the people should be too lenient on the judgment of him because they needed him so much. So these are his enemies, which is they here. They fear that people are being too lenient because of them, because Alcibiades was so important, because of his military record, because he was a great general, that the people were quite forgiving and they would sort of ignore the problems through these statues as a result of it. Let me just re-skim this bit because I can't remember. So again, this is them trying to find sort of jury members to act against him. Nothing particularly important, so we're just going to skip that bit through. So now they're they're in Italy on the way to Sicily. So Nicias, remember, was one of the key generals, and so was Lamachus. So Alcibiades sails to Sicily, and then he's brought back to Athens to stand trial. So again, we have evidence that demagogues are not in complete control of the Athenian democracy, because we have one here. Alcibiades is having to stand trial. And we also have a quote here that talks about the same kind of issues, that during his absence, his enemies went to work more vigorously. So again, demagogues, do not have control. Alcibiades does not have complete control over the people. And in fact, it says here that the people provoked themselves for not bringing Alcibiades to trial and judgment at the time. It's against the same issue that's up here. The same issue. So again, it's just showing that Alcibiades has fallen from grace, that he's not as popular as he was, and therefore him as a demagogue is not being particularly powerful. However, this is all kind of tidied up with events to do when he wanted to be recalled. So we've got Alcibiades is now prospering brilliantly, so he's doing well again. This is when he was in Samos, just double checking my thoughts. So remember, in Samos he wanted to be recalled to Athens, and he kind of helped negotiate a mutiny in Samos, which meant he was recalled with the promise of bringing Persian money. And we've got Declare had been fortified, so if you can have that very simple quote for the Peloponnesian War. But this is kind of going on about a festival, which we're not particularly interested in, so we're going to skim across. Again, about sacrifices and dances. You could possibly highlight this to do religion, but we'll do that while we're here. There we go. Showing that religion was really important to the Athenians. Not done religion yet, but we can have that quote for later. And again, he's doing this because he wants to get his good reputation back. So he's doing that to sort of ensure that he's really popular. So he conducts the ceremony of sort of bringing back the statue into Athens in a particular way in order to make himself popular, as is pointed out here. It's full sight of his native city, with all his fellow citizens, eyewitnesses of his valour. So he's brave, everybody's really happy he's back, so he's back in power again. And then it's still talking about the same festival. So August and Devout was the spectacle, which is generally thus displayed that he was hailed by those who were not unfriendly to him. As high priest. So again, his popularity is soared. You could argue maybe he's using religion in order to make himself popular, in order to have power over the people, quite possibly. Either way, it ends up with no enemy dared to attack him, so it's achieved his aims. He's popular again, he's happy, he's in power, and then people of the humble and poorer sort, he's so captivated by his leadership that they were filled with an amazing passion to have him as their tyrant. So remember, the Athenian democracy, there's a lot of power with the poor people. So Plutarch is making this point that the poorest in society loved him so much that they will happily have him as their tyrant. So he has complete control over the democracy. This is obviously going to be an exaggeration, because the Athenian democracy is set up in such a way that although you can have a really powerful person in control, all matters, all decisions are still made within the assembly or the ecclesia. So again, this is kind of like I'm going to say a really clever word then, and I've forgotten how to say it. Doesn't matter. It's showing Plutarch's exaggeration, so be aware of that. Okay, and that is it for the sources on Nicias and Alcibiades.